Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be reviewing the Boxing Day test today at Grassroots Cricket. I'm your host, Behram Qazi. You can find me at Def Mango on Twitter, and with me is my colleague Abdullah Ansari. So, Abdullah bhai, wonderful test match. It ebbed and flowed. It had everything. A great surface as well. Groundsman ko balke props bhi de diye Shan Masood ne, which was well deserved. And Pakistan had their moments. They could have even won this test match, but missed opportunities cost them. First innings, 52 extras, two drop chances in the slips by Abdullah Shafiq, more importantly, David Warner early on, and then two half chances also went down. But none of that would have mattered had Abdullah held on to the Mitch Marsh catch in the second innings. ठीक है हो जाता है गेम में but when people will look back at this test ये वाली जो ड्रॉप कैचेस वाली मेमोरी है जरा वो काफी प्रोमिनेंट रहेगी.
That's true. I do feel that it was a missed opportunity, but at the same time, I think it will be remembered more for Pat Cummins being Pat Cummins rather than anything else because the way that he was bowling, I feel that nothing short of a Babar Azam classic or Rizwan hanging in there till the end would have been enough for Pakistan to pull off a win. Even if Pakistan were within 50 runs of the target with 5 wickets remaining, I wouldn't be confident with Cummins bowling because he's just operating at that level right now. So, yeah.
Let's talk a bit about him. Of course, Pat Cummins took his second 10 wicket haul in his test career. 57 tests, 252 wickets at 22 apiece. He was pretty much unplayable all test match. Or support bhi bada acha kiya usko. Nathan Lyon took four in the first innings, Stark took four in the second, and Josh Hazelwood took only two wickets in the game. But both of those wickets were like pretty much the best ones that came from Australia, right? Saud Shakil ko jo bowled mara tha and then getting Babar in the second inning. So Australia's bowling attack did really well, but Pat Cummins really stood out, and he's had a habit of doing exactly this over the last year, particularly as captain as well. And he's been quite pragmatic, not that overly attacking captain either. Overall, how do you see Pat Cummins as a cricketer and as an asset for Australia in Test cricket?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. The more he plays, the more he just cements his legacy as one of the greatest. So there's not much to debate there. You could just see when the Australians were bowling, like even though the others bowled well, and especially Hazelwood bowled a really good spell in that last innings, but there's a gulf in quality between even Cummins and his peers of Hazelwood and Stark, who are both like very good, very high level test bowlers themselves, but Cummins is just on a different level. So I think that that is something that Pakistan obviously have to contend with. That if you have to beat that level of skill, then you have to display something remarkable yourself, and we have perhaps failed to do that, especially with Babar not making runs so far in the series.
Yeah, and I would even go out on a limb and say that he's Australia's best pacer in Test cricket, at least since Glenn McGrath. And I'd take him over Stark and Hazelwood. Like you said, there's a gulf over there as well. And you also mentioned about how Australia operate at a higher skill level. That is why I feel like the chances that they dropped, of course, Rizwan got a life, Salman got a life, even Imam got a life. So they didn't matter as much as the chances that Pakistan missed, because Australia, if you give them a sniff, that too in their own backyard, then they're most likely to make you pay and make them pay. They did. And there was also some other controversy. Of course, Mohammad Hafiz wasn't quite happy with the technology, called it a curse even, and probably emanated from the Rizwan dismissal. So, Abdullah bhai, we all saw in the replay, it did catch a bit of his wristband. Now, some people can debate whether or not the wristband should be considered part of the glove or not, but the hotspot spike suggested that it did catch a bit of the wristband. So for me, it was out, but rather unlucky way to go, though, no?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's Cummins. He generated a bit of extra bounce from that length, which surprised Rizwan. So he tried to lower his arms, but he couldn't do it in time. And I didn't think, I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people felt that maybe there was something a bit off about it. But to me, it was simple that uh, it's clearly come off the top of the wristband, and it's hitting his arm as well. But he Rizwan was indicating that he felt it touched his arm, and that's fine. It's not very, the wristband is like some way up above the wrist because it's that large. So he could have felt it on the arm, but it could have brushed the wristband at the same time. I don't think that there should have been any controversy about it, and the comments. frankly, in the press conference were embarrassing to say the least. I think that could have been avoided.
Yeah, my thoughts are exactly the same as yours. And with respect to Hafiz's comments, of course, him calling technology is a curse and everything, there were some other decisions, that Hassan Ali double breakthrough, which didn't result in a wicket versus Mitch Marsh. Sure, Pakistan got a bit unlucky on those occasions, but they also got lucky, right, with the Cummins dismissal. Like there seemed to be a bit of daylight between the inside edge and the ball. So I'm not sure how to view this. Like your coach coming out and saying that Pakistan were the better side, but technology cursed them and they ultimately lost. It's a bad look. But then the professor has never been one to mince his words. He's also always very opinionated. I don't mind him per se, but people are going to make fun of him now, and that's very much understandable.
Yeah, I think a lot of his argument was about umpire's call, and like, given his stature in the cricketing world, I would hope that he understands why it's necessary. Like, it's a perfectly valid and reasonable I mean, the reasoning for why umpire's call exists is pretty solid. So I don't think that just giving that idea that, oh, we need to do away with umpire's call, everything that's hitting is hitting, everything that's missing is missing, then you'd have a lot more. Cricket would become quite a different game if you removed umpire's call, and there's a reason why it's there. So I think that we need to take these things into consideration. And yes, of course, some of the umpiring, like uh, especially Joel Wilson, has a habit of making poor decisions, and even Michael Goff at times was a bit disappointing in this match. But I think that overall, eventually these types of things even out. So I don't think that it's worth having a huge discussion about.
Yeah, funny that you brought up Joel Wilson because he's roughed people up the wrong way over the last couple of years, and rightly so because he's made some terrible decisions. But anyway, let's move forward. Let's talk about Pakistan's bowling. Now, we were always debating whether or not Pakistan will be able to take 20 wickets in a test match in Australia, and they did this time around. Only the eighth instance of Pakistan completing this feat in Australia or down under. And in the last seven occasions, they won four tests, lost three. Now it's four wins and four losses in eight, but still a remarkable performance, particularly Mir Hamza. He got the ball to swing both ways, and in the second innings, he was lethal. Took a couple of good catches in the first innings as well. Shaheen was back to Shaheening in the second innings, got a first over wicket and the early breakthrough of Marnus Labuschagne. And then, Amir Jamal did well. Hassan Ali bowled really well for not a lot of success. And Salman Ali Agha pitched in with that wicket of David Warner. So Pakistan, I think this was as good as I've ever seen them bowl in Australia, barring the Sydney Test in 2010, where I think that's probably the best I've seen them bowl in Australia. But even in this millennium, ever since the turn of the century, this was the second best bowling performance as per the stats by Pakistan in Australia.
Yeah, I think definitely the bowling performance is, they have, especially in this test, in the first test, we probably conceded a few too many runs in the first innings. But here, I think they did really well. And the important thing is that the attack overall is functioning, everyone is playing their roles, and especially Salman Ali Agha being able to hold an end when he's brought on has proved to be quite important because we've struggled with that in the past. Uh, Also, it can't really be denied that the pitches have helped us. The the pitches having some assistance for the fast bowlers, especially, helps to close that gap a little bit, which we've had trouble with on the previous tours. I think in 2016, for example, Wahab and even Amir bowled decently, but the pitches were just too flat for them to compete with Australia's attack. And in 2019, of course, they were just too inexperienced. So it's a bit of both. I think that the performance has obviously been exceptional. Some good tactics at times, like the way in the first test as well, when Shan used uh, his the specific field to get head out and stuff like that. So I think good combination of tactics and a real wholehearted effort by the bowlers, we would have to say, especially with Shaheen bowling 54 overs in this match. So yeah, commendable.
Yeah, about that, Shaheen, of course, did well to take six wickets in the game, but he bowled 54 overs, and that's an awful lot for a bowler who just not long ago was coming back from injury and everything. And, he is visibly 10 clicks slower than he used to be. He's averaging mid 120s or high or early 130s, really. And this is a bit of a cause for concern. But Shaheen still managed to get wickets because he can move the ball both ways. Given the workload and the fact that he is Pakistan's T20 international captain now and will probably play all five of those games in New Zealand, how big of an issue is this? Because even we at Grassroots Cricket, we saw all of those stats coming out, right? How since he made his debut, no one has bowled more overs for Pakistan, and the gap between him and Hassan in that period is quite significant, right? Shaheen is what, 1,600 something overs, then Hassan is 1,010, if I'm not wrong. And even since he's made his debut, I don't think like a lot of other bowlers have bowled that much since 2018 to 2023. If you look at all formats and even domestic, because he plays all of these franchise leagues as well. So a fast bowler only has a certain amount of deliveries in him or her, and Pakistan are doing everything they can to burn him out, seemingly.
Yeah, and I think if Shaheen hadn't missed a year or so because of injury, then he would have played those home tests and he would have probably been at the top. I think the top is probably, I think Cummins perhaps has the most overs for pacer since Shaheen's debut, around 1950 or something like that. And I'm sure Shaheen would have easily crossed 2000 because of the way we tend to use him. You do, this is generally we just use him like wherever you need a wicket, you just keep bowling Shaheen until you get a wicket, and that's not really an optimum approach for your like strike fast bowler. Like Cummins, for example, bowls long spells at times, but he doesn't just keep bowling because he obviously has a good attack around him. It's just that we're so dependent on Shaheen ever since his debut, and with Amir fading away after that, other seniors as well, like Wahab going away. So he quickly became the leader of the attack in his early 20s, which is unheard of. But he is that good. I think that the primary concern for me would still be that because he's the T20 captain now, he has to play all the T20s, and I think that that is probably something where his work that's probably somewhere where we could consider cutting his workload down. Of course, in tests also, I would it would be nice to have a functional attack so that you don't have to rely on Shaheen to bowl 50 overs a test. He's bowled far too many overs per test match generally in recent times. Even in Sri Lanka, he bowled a lot. And in the past 6 months, I think Shaheen has bowled around 310 or something overs for Pakistan, and the next highest is like 105. So the gap is quite large at this point. I think it was Haris Rauf who had bowled the most. So we really need to figure out a way to keep that workload manageable. The good thing about Shaheen is that his fitness is really good. He is very durable, especially once he figures out the few issues he might be having with his action right now. It's still not the same as it was pre-injury. The knee plays a bit towards the right, and etc. And there, I'm sure, technical reasons behind that. So once he figures those out and his action becomes as fluid as it was before, I'm sure that the pace will get back to where it was as well. But I just think that it's unsustainable to keep using him as we are. No country uses their fast bowler in all three formats, expecting him to be there all the time, especially in T20 bilaterals, which I don't know when we will get out of the mentality of treating them as some kind of World Cup when they're not that.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly that last part, because Pakistan play a lot of T20 internationals and, bilateral T20s don't really mean much. So I would agree that that's where you'd want to rest Shaheen, but he's probably going to play all of those games now. And if it means that Shaheen will be back to his devastating best if Pakistan rests him for SCG, I'd go for it. I wouldn't be too worried about that. And yeah, sure, every test matters in the test championship. Even if the series is lost, there's something to play for. But would you rather have a broken Shaheen come T20 World Cup? Probably not, right? So if you have to give him rest somewhere, I feel like he needs it because I'm not too sure about the technical deficiencies over here. You spoke about the alignment and the knee and everything, which is invaluable insight for all of our viewers and listeners. And yeah, these things need to be sorted out because we all know what peak Shaheen looks like, and we miss him. Pretty straightforward as that. Anyway, let's move forward. You also mentioned Shan Masood and his captaincy and how he's manufactured a couple of dismissals. Travis Head in the first Test match. Mitch Marsh in this Test match with that deep backward point ish fielder. Amir Jamal was there, and he removed him that way in the first innings. And then also the setup for Manas in the second innings with the leg slip and everything. I think that was a very, very sly or cunning. But yeah, there's a lot to love about Shan, the captain, thus far. He's done well. He's spoken well. He's even batted decently. Scored two or twin 50s in the MCG Boxing Day Test, which is not something that a lot of Pakistan captains have done, right? I reckon Imran Khan has done it and Hanif
Yeah,
has done it, and that's
yeah.
it, right? Yeah, so he's part of quite an esteemed list over there. And Shan, Shan 3.0 or 4.0 or whatever you want to call him, ever since he's reinvented himself most recently, he's a free flowing batter. He attacks and he doesn't get bogged down, at all in his innings. But I believe that in the first innings, when Pakistan had lost two quick wickets, Abdullah and Babar, not just any wickets, those two guys, perhaps Shan's shot was a bit unnecessary. I'd like to see him go for the big scores as well. And then also, people were critical of how he kept Abdullah in the slips or first slip. Now, you could look at that both ways. You could say that Abdullah is probably earmarked as the first slip and they want to give him confidence. But the flip side is that you just go with yourself or Babar or one of those guys who are capable of fielding in the slips. So, what do you make of Shan, the captain, and the batter? And do you think he's done enough over here?
Yeah, I think when before the series began, I felt that the thing that would decide his captaincy will go would be how he does with the bat, and I think he definitely has the skill to score in Australia, so it's not surprising to see him fare well with the bat. Again, like you said, ideally you really need big runs, and
Hmm.
even he mentioned that until you don't have 100 from like one of your main top four batsmen, it's going to be difficult to get anywhere in a test match. So yeah, perhaps there is room to balance the aggression a little bit better. I feel that the same applied to Rizwan in the first innings. He perhaps was over attacking a bit when he could have been a bit more circumspect. So I think with Shan, his captaincy and his batting have both been pretty good, and there's not too much to complain about. And it's just that now he will have some confidence with, especially with having scored some runs. And regarding the Abdullah point, I think it's fair to say that perhaps he could have replaced him sooner, because even though before the series, obviously there's a whole process that you go through when you're deciding who's going to be your first slip catcher, who's going to be at second slip, and all. At a certain point, perhaps you think that the guy has lost enough confidence that it doesn't make sense. You have more to lose than gain by keeping him there.
Hmm. Yeah, I
So
mean,
maybe that decision,
hmm.
yeah. So I think that decision could have possibly been taken a bit earlier. Obviously, it was a bit late by the time it happened, even though Babar would eventually take a good catch in the slips later on. But that's a very fine point. Like, I don't know if you can really blame him, but yeah, perhaps he should have done it sooner. But still, again, it's determined before the series, and that Abdullah struggled a bit in that. It happens. It
Hmm.
happens with, especially with a cricketer as young as him.
Absolutely. And whilst those catches or dropped catches will go down as important, events in this game, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. And Abdullah is young, he'll grow, he'll learn. And this could be one of those battle hardening experiences for him. And he's obviously a prodigy with the bat. Everyone, I'm pretty sure, I think everyone recognizes that. But anyway, with respect to Shan as captain and batter, yeah, I mean, I like the fact that Shan 4.0 or 3.0 has a clear head, and that's something that's helped him with the bat, and he's been proactive for the most part. Let's talk about the rest of Pakistan's batting, right? Imam was abject, no two ways about it. Abdullah was good in the first innings, went fishing in the second. Then you had, of course, Shan Masood, who we've spoken about. Babar Azam, gap between bat and pad, and he's facing a lot of vitriol online. Some people are asking him to be replaced by Sarfaraz Ahmed, so that's another story. And Saud Shakil, of course, first Senna tour, wouldn't blame him much. Salman Ali Agha superseded my expectations. I actually did not expect him to score that 50 in the second innings that he did, so good on him. Overall, I'd say that they weren't god awful, but perhaps some runs by the middle order in the first innings and things could have looked a bit different.
Yeah, I think the middle order is really where we have struggled so far, because on quite a few occasions we have gotten some kind of a platform from the top order. Even in the first test, when Imam and Abdullah had that good opening partnership, then that was a pretty good base, but we couldn't build on that. So that is a definite concern. Again, it comes down to skill set and which players you can expect to perform. And obviously, Barber is right at the top of that list for Australia. Saud, it was always going to be a difficult tour for him because his style of play is not perhaps not ideal for Australia. So that's understandable, and you just hope that he learn from it and get better in the future. Rizwan batted really
Hmm,
well.
I forgot
I
him.
think that in the first innings, yeah, I think in the first innings, if he had been, like I mentioned earlier, a bit more circumspect, perhaps he could have gotten a big score because Amir Jamal and Shaheen were able to battle it out a bit in the first innings. And in the second innings, also, he was looking in control for the most part until his dismissal. And I think he was probably one of the most in control batsmen in this test match for us. So I think in the Sydney test, I think we definitely need runs out of someone like that. One of Barber is one, preferably someone in the top four to make 100. That's really what you need to be able to put up big scores in a test match. And without doing that, I think Pakistan will struggle to close out games even because especially in like the first innings, really after conceding a decent score, you ideally want to get a bit of a lead to give yourself some margin. And until you don't score decent runs from your main batsman, that will be difficult to do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Babar in his last 9 innings in all of 2023 averaged 22 with the bat, no 50s, and that's definitely underwhelming for a batter of his stature. So let's hope that that big innings does come in Sydney. And yeah, I think you're spot on with Rizwan. I think he looked really, really comfortable in control and maybe missed a trick there by not trying to take it deep. But I enjoyed the intent. And I also enjoyed the catch that he took to dismiss Alex Carey. Definitely, put some mafias in the mud. But anyway, some final talking points would be changes for Sydney. I want to ask you, would you replace Imam with Saim? And if you are to bring in a spinner, because the SCG is known to offer some turn, one of Abrar or Sajid would come in depending on Abrar's fitness. Which pacer would you replace? Because that's a tough one.
Yeah, regarding Imam, I think this was always on the cards that by the third test we would be having this discussion. He was always going to start, but ultimately it's difficult to really. I mean, there's so many things uh, that can be better. That he struggles to play pace. He struggles to play movement. He struggles to score, and you can't really blame him for that because he just doesn't have the kind of game to be able to score consistently against quality pace bowling in these types of conditions. So he tries to play to his strength, which is to play conservatively, and that's fine. But it's clearly not working out so far, except for that first innings. So in the first test, so I think it's fine to include Saim, and especially I think that this team management would hopefully be mature enough to give him that required confidence and to make him realize that it's not a big deal if he fails. It'll be his debut in Australia. It shouldn't have to come to that, but I mean, I think that we can take that, especially with the series loss, that there's not much more to lose. We've lost 16 in a row. At worst, it'll be 17. So whatever. And regarding the
Yeah.
Pacers, I think assuming that Abrar is fit and Sydney offers some spin, I saw today that the curator had said that if the weather is right, then they do expect some turn on offers. So then I think Abrar does come in, and presumably Salman Ali Agha retains his spot. So then you'd need to replace one of the primary pacers. The latest, a few journalists have been reporting that they will indeed rest Shaheen, so
Hmm.
he could come in Shaheen's position. And but with that said, even if he comes in for Shaheen, I think if it's a traditional Sydney deck, a little dryish, and you have some possibility of extracting reverse swing from it, then you might want to include Wasim Jr. perhaps. Even though Hassan bowled really well,
Hmm?
and Mir Hamza also bowled really well, so it'll be difficult to decide who to bench. But I would like to see Wasim Jr. involved if the track is a bit dry, just so that even he gets some time playing red ball cricket at this point. Like you need he plays like one match a year. The test match he played against New Zealand last year. I think he played two matches last year, and those were the only first
Hmm.
class games he's played in like 2 years now, I think. So playing another wouldn't do him any harm, I think. And with the series lost again, it's an experiment that can be considered.
Yeah, interesting picks over there. I too would probably go with Saim over Imam and just give him a license that go out there and don't worry about your place in the team. And yeah, funny, I just remembered that I called it, right? Rizwan would be back in the team after the leak, and you said he wouldn't be. So I definitely have that one over you. And now we're hearing these reports about Shaheen. I wouldn't be opposed to that. If resting Shaheen means Shaheen getting better, I'm fine with that. I would definitely bring in a spinner if there is some turn on offer, and if Abrar is fit, he would be that person. I'm very very interested with your Wasim Junior pick. So if there is some reverse on offer, I do believe he can be good, but I'm personally not too convinced with the red ball record. But that's also to your point because he doesn't get to play a lot of red ball cricket, right? So it's a double edged sword in that regard. Let's see what happens in Sydney, who gets picked, who gets dropped, whether or not they make any changes. But Pakistan last won a test match versus Australia in Australia and Sydney, and it's been what? It's 2023 or almost 2024 now, so it's what, 28 years. That's a long time. So here's to hoping that they can, maybe rewrite history and defeat Australia at Sydney again. We'll never know, or we will shortly actually. But anyway, thanks for your time, Abdullah bhai, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. For similar content, stay tuned. Brought to you by Grassroots Cricket.